You never forget the moment the world shifts under your feet. For me, it was the night the stage lights cut out mid-scene, right in the heart of our final dress rehearsal. We were 24 hours from opening our most ambitious student production yet, long day's journey into night. The theater went black, silence swallowed the air, and I knew something was wrong, deeply wrong. I didn't panic. Years on Broadway had taught me better. I stood in the wings of the Halstead Performing Arts Center, staring into the dark like it owed me an explanation. My students froze in their places, half in character, half in fear. They didn't know yet that this was more than a technical glitch. But I did. I felt it building for months, like a second-act betrayal waiting for its cue. My name's Richard Langston. For 20 years, I directed professional theater in New York, earned my stripes under hot lights and colder critics. But 5 years ago, I traded the roar of the city for the quieter ache of small-town education. I thought I was coming here to teach kids how to act. I didn't realize I'd end up fighting for their very right to be seen. That night, as I restored emergency lighting and calmed anxious students, I spotted two silhouettes slipping out the fire exit behind the prop cage. One was unmistakable, Cameron Vale, our benefactor, the kind of man who always seemed to be networking even when no one asked. The other was Madison, the school's guidance counselor and my wife of 11 years. I froze. Not because I suspected. I already knew. But this was confirmation wrapped in shadow and cowardice. Earlier that semester, Cameron had shown up with a dazzling donation and a fake Hollywood smile. Said he wanted to give back to the arts. Madison practically rolled out a red carpet for him, doting over his every empty anecdote about producing some off-brand reality show and almost working with Scorsese. I knew men like Cameron. Flashy. Hungry. Dangerous. Madison had changed when he arrived. Her criticism of my work sharpened, her praise of Cameron became endless. She'd once supported my after-school drama therapy program for struggling students, now she dismissed it as emotional hand-holding. Every compliment I gave to a student she twisted into favoritism. Every Saturday I spent mentoring troubled teens she weaponized as neglect. That night, after the blackout, I returned to my office and opened the folder I'd started months earlier, labeled Act 1, Foreshadowing. It contained screenshots, emails, receipts. I'd learned a long time ago, if you want to survive in theater, you keep the script and you always keep the receipts. I documented Madison's sudden shift in behavior. Her Instagram posts morphing from inspirational quotes to veiled digs about failed artists clinging to high school stages. Her secret meetings with Cameron under the guise of student support planning. I had photos. I had timestamps. But it wasn't enough to catch them. Not yet. They thought they were playing a private game. They forgot I was a director. And I was just getting started with the first act. Most people don't realize how much a theater hears. The creak of the floorboards under hurried steps, the whispered rehearsals in the dark, the laughter, the tears, it all lingers. Especially when something's rotten behind the curtain. The Halstead Center had been my sanctuary, but now it felt like it was trying to warn me. I started noticing the little things first. Props began vanishing. A journal critical to the second act? Gone. A character's glasses? Disappeared. Scene markers, costume pieces, stage directions scribbled out in pencil. At first, it felt like disorganization, students rushing, volunteers misplacing things. But then I saw Cameron casually wandering near the prop cages late in the evening. Alone. No reason. Just looking. And always after hours. I installed hidden cameras myself. 2 in the wings, 1 backstage near the exit, 1 in my office. I didn't tell anyone, not even Principal Harris, who'd always had my back. If this play was going to unfold like a tragedy, I wanted to be the one holding the script. What I saw over the next week didn't just confirm my suspicions, it cracked them wide open. Cameron was sneaking into the storage room regularly. Madison would meet him sometimes. Their conversations were always brief but intimate. They'd lean close, laugh quietly, sometimes argue, then split off in different directions just before students arrived. One night, I watched footage of them rifling through my desk drawers. Cameron took something. I zoomed in on the frame, a USB drive I'd been using to back up student therapy session notes. Confidential files. Personal stories. Vulnerable kids. I stared at the screen for a long time that night. That was the moment it stopped being about me. They weren't just betraying our marriage or mocking my work. They were endangering the very students I'd sworn to protect. Madison had started framing my after-school mentoring sessions as unauthorized therapy. She whispered to the school board that my boundary lines were blurred. Of course, she never mentioned how she'd posed for photos with those same students for her Instagram, always tagged #HealingJourney and #GuidanceQueen. Cameron played his part, too. He'd corner students after rehearsal asking about their home lives, promising opportunities in theater, LA workshops, maybe even a Netflix short. He'd call it mentoring. I called it grooming. Then came the board meetings. Cameron had somehow gotten himself into closed sessions. Madison vouched for him, called him a strategic partner. And suddenly rumors started about the theater being unsafe, about needing renovation, about private investment. I wasn't surprised when my request for new lighting was denied the same week Cameron announced a personal donation to the school's building fund. Or when a new foundation called Elevate Halstead began buying up the properties around the theater under shell companies all connected back to him. The play we were rehearsing had lines about denial, the kind that poisons a family from within. I realized I was living it beat for beat. Then a student came forward. Samantha. Quiet girl, maybe 15. She waited until everyone left after rehearsal and asked if she could talk to me. Her hands were shaking. I heard Mrs. Vale laughing about Marcus, she said. She said he was exaggerating his trauma for attention, but that it made great content for her followers. I felt something inside me break. Not snap, just crack, like a splinter splitting off clean wood. I wrote everything down. Samantha's quote. The date. The time. I added it to my now growing file, Act 2, Rising Action. By the end of that week, I had hours of footage. Cameron stealing props. Madison gossiping about student trauma. Phone calls about real estate deals. Every smear against my name. Every lie planted with board members. I wasn't just going to defend myself anymore. I was going to direct the final act of their little production. And this time, I wasn't handing out scripts. Opening night wasn't supposed to be a war zone. The lobby was buzzing with parents, alumni, and half the school board. Programs were handed out with pride. Our lead student, Marcus, once a kid who couldn't make eye contact, stood backstage gripping a prop whiskey bottle like his life depended on it. For months, he'd poured his pain into this role. For weeks, I'd watched him transform. And for the last 3 hours, I'd been waiting for the fuse I lit to reach the dynamite. It started with a mistake. Cameron's mistake. He'd posted something smug on his production company's Facebook page. A behind-the-scenes photo of him and Madison clinking champagne glasses in the wings. The caption? Another high school stage soon to be something real. He forgot to check the visibility settings. Within minutes, students saw it. Parents saw it. I saw it. And I knew this was my cue. The second act of Long Day's journey began with Marcus delivering one of the most difficult scenes in the entire play. A monologue about shame, about broken families, about dreams that rot from the inside. He gave it everything. Every ounce of hurt that boy had ever carried, he laid bare on that stage. And in the front row, I watched Madison laugh. She covered her mouth with a napkin from her wine tumbler, but I saw it. Cameron whispered something in her ear. She giggled again. That's when the phones started buzzing. Someone, one of my kids, I suspect, leaked the screenshots. Dozens of them. Messages between Madison and Cameron. Bragging about manipulating the school board. Mocking student traumas. Sharing real therapy notes for narrative content. Planning how to frame me for emotional misconduct and shutter the theater under safety violations. The theater was full. Word spread like wildfire. I watched the expression shift on every parent's face, first confusion, then disbelief, then rage. But the show didn't stop. My students didn't miss a single beat. That stage became their rebellion, their voice, their weapon. They acted like professionals. No, better than professionals. They acted like survivors. I left the booth quietly. Stepped into the office. Opened the folder I'd saved for this night, final act. I called the district superintendent. The ethics board. My attorney. A local reporter I trusted. All of them had been waiting. I gave them the green light. The first knock came before the curtain dropped. It was the district's legal liaison. He asked to speak with me in private. He'd received the entire compiled dossier, videos, voice recordings, student testimonies, purchase records for fake real estate firms, even screenshots of Madison mocking a student's suicide attempt. He didn't say much. Just, this is going to be ugly. Good. It should be. Back in the auditorium, the final scene drew to a close. The cast took their bows to a full standing ovation. Parents cried. Teachers cheered. I walked on stage beside my students, not to steal their spotlight, but to give it right back to them. Then came the second wave of notifications. The ethics board had reviewed the materials. They were en route for emergency hearings. The school board froze Cameron's donation fund. Madison's counseling access was revoked by morning. But even that didn't compare to what happened after the curtain call. Outside, reporters had gathered. Students were already showing them the leaked messages. And when one brave parent asked Madison what she had to say for herself, she simply hissed, "It's all a setup. My husband, he's sabotaging me." That was the last time she ever called me her husband. Because the lights were back on now, and everyone could finally see them for what they were. They came for her the next morning. Not in handcuffs, at least not yet, but with something far worse in our world, a formal suspension letter hand-delivered by the superintendent himself. Madison stood in the middle of our kitchen, barefoot, robe askew, trying to spin some last-minute version of control. But her voice, once sharp enough to cut through bone, sounded hollow. "They'll apologize when this blows over," she said. "I'll tell them it was all misinterpreted satire, performance art, a misunderstanding. I'm a counselor. I know how narratives work." But the story wasn't hers to control anymore. Within 24 hours, a dozen students had come forward. Samantha gave her statement first. Then Marcus. Then Emma, who brought printed screenshots of text messages Madison had sent, pressuring her to lie about my behavior to the board. Cameron went into damage control mode, faster and louder than anyone. Press releases. Legal threats. My commitment to the arts. He posted a video in front of a green screen meant to look like a production set. I knew the hallway. He filmed it in a rented office in a strip mall across town. But no PR stunt could fix what the investigation uncovered. Security footage. Phone records. Financial trails. Surveillance of Cameron and Madison exchanging student files after hours. Venmo payments to local board members. Even an email where Cameron suggested planting drugs in the prop room to make it look like my students were using during rehearsals. They weren't just malicious. They were stupid. I watched it all unravel from my office at school, blinds drawn, door locked. The only sound was the steady clicking of my mouse as I backed up every file to 3 separate hard drives. I knew how quickly these people tried to rewrite history. I wasn't just ready, I was airtight. By the end of the week, Cameron was banned from school property. Madison was officially under investigation by the state licensing board. Our theater was granted emergency funds for security upgrades. The board froze all construction proposals linked to Cameron's shell companies. And every student who had ever been manipulated by them was offered free, independent counseling. But it didn't stop there. Parents started organizing. One mother stormed into the school office holding a printout of Madison's Instagram post where she joked about a student's panic attack being the most dramatic performance of the semester. Her voice was calm but deadly. My daughter trusted her. I want every single file she ever touched. And then came the media. What began as a community scandal became a state story. Guidance counselor exploits student trauma for social media fame. Hollywood producer accused of targeting school arts program for profit. I didn't talk to the reporters. I didn't need to. I'd already said everything I needed to quietly through evidence. My kids kept coming to rehearsals. They didn't care about the headlines. They came for the stage for each other. We started prepping for spring semester like nothing had happened, except now the room felt lighter, like we'd kicked a predator out of the den. One night, as I packed up the rehearsal scripts, Cameron showed up in the parking lot. He didn't get out of his car. Just sat there, windows up, staring at the building. He was probably calculating how much money he'd lose. How many names he couldn't drop anymore. I stood in the doorway with the house lights glowing behind me, holding the same USB drive he once stole from my desk. We locked eyes for maybe 10 seconds. I didn't wave. I didn't speak. I just shut the door. And turned off the lights. Their fall wasn't cinematic. There was no explosion, no screaming breakdown on the courthouse steps. No viral confession, no weeping apology video that made the world forgive. It was slower. Sharper. Like the slow unraveling of a poorly stitched costume mid-performance, thread by thread, with everyone watching. Madison was the first to snap. Her state counselor's license was revoked within 3 weeks of the ethics hearings. They'd reviewed hundreds of social media posts and dozens of testimonies, all confirming one thing: she'd monetized trauma, turned therapy sessions into clickbait, used confidential pain as a branding strategy. She tried to post one last video, some half-baked monologue about being a woman silenced by a patriarchal system. But the comments weren't kind, and the platforms were less forgiving. Her accounts were deleted for ethics violations. Her sponsors pulled out. Her influencer brand? Gone. She moved out in silence. No note. No goodbye. Just an empty closet and the smell of designer perfumes still clinging to the curtains. I let her go. I wasn't interested in vengeance anymore. Just peace. Cameron, however, didn't get off so quietly. Turns out Halstead wasn't his first school theater. He'd done this before. Oregon. Minnesota. Northern California. The scheme was always the same: charm the board, fake credentials, promise revitalization, then gut the program and flip the property. But this time, someone documented everything. That someone was me. The state attorney general opened a full investigation after I handed over the last drive, every false permit, every forged document, every photo of him slipping confidential files into his briefcase. Building inspectors confirmed structural sabotage designed to justify demolition. Investors pulled out. Lawsuits followed. His so-called production company filed for bankruptcy 3 weeks later. His wife filed for divorce 2 days after that. The final nail? A leaked deposition where Cameron admitted that every celebrity he'd name-dropped had never even met him. His entire identity, his empire, was a performance. A fraud. And like any bad actor caught under the spotlight, he crumbled. As for the theater, the Halstead Center was granted historic preservation status by the state. The program I'd fought to protect was awarded a grant to expand statewide. Our theater therapy model was now being used in 10 schools and counting. Broadway directors reached out to offer summer mentorships. Alumni came home to help rebuild. Marcus, my once silent student, was offered a scholarship to study drama therapy in New York. Jessica, who'd been pressured to lie, now co-leads a weekend youth group for at-risk teens. And me? I'm still here, still teaching, still directing. But now I know the value of silence broken, of truth documented, of loyalty earned. They tried to hijack a theater. They underestimated a stage manager with a memory like a steel trap and 2 decades of patience. I didn't scream. I didn't threaten. I simply waited for my cue and I let the truth take center stage. Because in the end, real revenge isn't loud. It's quiet, measured, inevitable, and it always arrives right before the curtain falls.